Perfection is nearly impossible. If something gets close, we hold on to it tightly. Everything else feels inferior. We as people hold on to those perfect moments with deep conviction, the same conviction that grips the religious. Even things we thought were perfect seem not to shine so bright as time goes on. Maybe it was perfect for its time, but some change could make it that much better. Or maybe we just need to step back and let it breathe. Some things are better left alone. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is no stranger to remakes and remasters. Releases have attempted to recapture the perfection that inspired an entire generation and sold countless skateboards, gave purpose to those who weren't sure of themselves, and provided an identity to those who were lost. Every scrape and bruise was earned and deepened the connection between the living and the digital. None of the remakes have lived up to this. When Activision and Vicarious Visions announced a total remake of the first two games, excitement immediately started to build. Then, we took in a collective deep breath, standing on the very edge of total acceptance and absolute disappointment, bracing for the inevitable, expecting the same experiences we've had so many times before. Nobody wants to replay something they genuinely love, but now lacks what made it special. HD meant better visuals, but it also came with a small selection of levels and unrefined physics. Soon the light that radiated from a possible diamond among many roughs was mishandled and improperly cut, which refracted the light everywhere but where it needed to shine. After this entry, it seemed like getting those games updated to modern standards was next to impossible. Is it even possible to recapture the magic of the first two games? Could that same experience be given a new life on modern machines? This is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. It had been 8 years since the last remake of these two games, and though we'll always have the originals, getting a new perspective and look to these outdated visuals is something I personally look forward to in any iteration, even if the gameplay could be better. This game was no exception. I even pre-ordered the collector's edition. I couldn't pass up getting a real, full-sized version of the iconic deck from the first game, which is probably the best item in any collector's edition I've ever purchased. And like the beautiful graphic on the bottom of the deck, this game does not disappoint visually. Every one of these beloved spots I've spent so much time in look absolutely gorgeous. They've made them all look better than anything that's come before, and there have been two others that have cashed in on these timeless classics, making this the fourth version of these games. The first two Tony Hawk Pro Skater games are some of my favorite video games ever made. I've played them countless times, which encouraged me to get out and skate in real life. I haven't ever really played any other Tony Hawk games. I've run through a few of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 levels at a friend's house, but never completed any of them. I started the fourth game a few years ago, but lost interest quickly. It felt like it had veered off course maybe a little too far for me. I'm all in on the arcade-style gameplay with the 2-minute time limit. That keeps the gameplay interesting with something at stake, so my experience with the franchise lies with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2. Luckily for me, those are the two games that have seen the most remake and remaster love over the decades. But before we jump into the latest iteration and explain why it's such a big deal, it's important to look back at the history of these remasters and remakes to see why these games were once again remade. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was a phenomenon. Skateboarding was on the rise, but it took off after its release. There's something about the gameplay that gave people confidence to pick up a skateboard and learn how to skate. Maybe it was seeing how the character moved their feet, or just seeing tricks being performed from that perspective. The game centers around completing a list of goals within a 2-minute window. You are rewarded a VHS tape for each goal you complete. There are also 3 competition stages that give you 1 minute to do as many tricks as possible. Thankfully, you only need to rank 3rd to pass these stages. This game doesn't have the advanced abilities available on the other games in the series. That means no manuals or reverts to string tricks together to create epic combos and high scores. The game is very manageable in the earlier sections, then ramps up the difficulty in later stages, which is to be expected. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater sold extremely well, which prompted a sequel. The career mode of this game is basically unchanged from the first game. You need to complete a list of goals in each stage within the same 2-minute window, along with 3 competition stages that give you 1 minute to reach your highest score. The biggest difference is that you are no longer earning VHS tapes as rewards. It's now money. You also find money floating around each level. This money is used to upgrade your character's stats. Another major change was the addition of manualing. This is a major game changer. In the first game, the only way I could pass the high score goals was by finding a half-pipe or bull and do back-to-back vert tricks. Now you can combo grinds, manuals, and street tricks to rack up insane scores. This addition pushes the game above the first one for me. After Pro Skater 2, there would be a Pro Skater 3, 4, and eventually non-numbered entries in the series. But for some reason I've always stuck with the first 2. They're extremely fun with addicting gameplay. When Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 was on the verge of releasing, I decided to go back and play the other versions of these games, just to see how this new one compares to them. Between the release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 and 3, the original Xbox was treated with a remastered version of the first 2 games called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which was only released in North America. These are better looking versions of both games. The controls are surprisingly accurate to the originals. It was great jumping into Tony Hawk 2 with the better graphics. It's just as good as the original. Beating the Tony Hawk 2 career unlocks the 2X career with 3 brand new levels. These levels, in all honesty, aren't that great, but it's fun to see new things added to the game. There's a stage that takes place in a club, another on a construction site, and one at a skate park in Tampa. By completing the objectives and medaling in the competition stage unlocks the Tony Hawk 1 career. I was surprised that it included the career mode from the first Tony Hawk game, and I didn't expect it at all. Although it's written on the back cover, so I guess I just need to pay a little more attention. It was fun revisiting these levels with the Tony Hawk 2 moves added into them. But that's also where this game falters a bit. It's far too easy to get through it. Your character retains all the upgraded stats you gained during the Pro Skater 2 career. And instead of adjusting the goals to be more in line with your abilities, they are exactly the same as they are in the original game. I breezed through this game with 0 problems. Most levels took 1 attempt to finish all the goals. It was still fun to play through those levels, but it was far too easy. The biggest downside to Pro Skater 2X is that it was only released on the Xbox, which is a shame, because it's a really fun game and I think it would have benefited from a wider release. This also means that the Xbox controller is the most widely used controller to play it. I'm a firm believer that the D-pad is far superior for these Tony Hawk games. It's not impossible to use the analog stick, and I've played through these games with one. It just makes it difficult to precisely perform tricks. The precision just isn't there. Yes, the Xbox has a D-pad, but it's not very good and it's placed in an awkward spot. For my most recent playthrough, I bought the Hori Fighting Commander for the Xbox 360 and Xbox One. This controller feels great with this game, and I enjoyed it way more than when I initially played through it. It's much better than I remember it being. It's definitely worth playing. After 11 years of soul-searching, the Tony Hawk series would return to the first 2 games. Tony Hawk HD was released for the Xbox 360 in the summer of 2012. It also came out for the PS3 and Steam a few months later. It was only released digitally and has since been delisted from all digital marketplaces. A handful of levels from each game were remade in HD, and they all look great. The controls do not feel the same, and I remember seriously not liking the way they felt when I played this 9 years ago. Though, I think I've changed my mind. I guess through the years I've mellowed out, because they weren't so bad this time around. They are definitely different, but not in a way that makes me despise them. Again, I used the Hori Fighting Commander. The D-pad really makes controlling the character and performing tricks so much more precise. But I think there's a slight delay to my button presses. I'm not 100% sure there's a delay, but I swear I can feel it when I'm playing. What I really didn't like about this game is the big drop mechanic. It shows up everywhere. which is a problem in a game that's built on high drops and big ramps. I felt that it was unacceptable and totally ruined the game. That is until I realized you can hold down the ollie button and survive it just fine. It would have been nice if this was told to the player anywhere in the game. If it does tell you somewhere, I missed it completely. Another issue that rears its head is the characters bailing frequently, even on seemingly easy landings. And when you bail, your character turns into, I don't know what. This always looked weird to me. I also found that some parts of these levels are drastically different. They look the same, but they are not laid out how they used to be. This example has been shown before, but I know I can grab this item in the original release and 2X with no problem. Why is it so hard to get on this game? Though that's not to say that I didn't have fun with it. There are many parts of this game that I had a ton of fun with. I really like School 2 and Venice Beach. For whatever reason, they both felt great to play. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD is far from perfect. The small amount of levels, wonky physics, and inaccurate level design really took me out of it. It left me wondering if they would build on it and release more levels or if this was just a one-and-done situation. Well, it turned out that there were DLC levels for the third game that I didn't end up playing, and that was it. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD was a good idea with poor execution. Which brings us to the present. Vicarious Visions were given the task to remake these games, which I found very encouraging. With their work on the Crash Bandicoot remakes fresh on my mind, it put me at ease slightly. I drew in a long breath and launched the game. I immediately knew I was in for something good when the intro video started. The beginning clips are shrouded in VHS tape static. These clips transition to cleaner video with guerrilla radio punching you in the eardrums, signaling that this game has a legacy, but it's not those old games anymore. As I mentioned before, these levels are absolutely gorgeous. Never have they looked better. I particularly like Venice Beach. You skate through and around puddles from a recent downpour. They beautifully reflect everything around them. The sun is also setting or rising, I'm not sure which time of day it is. I sometimes think of one or the other, and it changes my perspective of the level. Beyond the great level aesthetics, this game also gets the controls right. They have a very familiar feel. I wouldn't say that they are the same as the original or 2X, but they're close. I felt as if the characters couldn't jump very high initially. It made the first stages with them very sluggish. After nabbing a few stat points and upgrading the ollie and air stats remedied this. I also felt that the character was difficult to line up straight after spinning in the air. This was absolutely my problem, and I didn't have this issue as the game progressed, and spins felt as natural as they always had. The first game is pretty straightforward compared to the 1999 release. The levels are laid out identically. They did, however, add extra goals to each level, which I was excited to see, as it extended the time I spent in each level and gave me more to do. The stat points also changed their location based on the character you're playing as. Speaking of the other characters, you can swap skaters without having to start a new skate tour. This is absolutely awesome. I'm glad I can switch between various skaters and not have to start the game from scratch. The only thing you need to do is go back to the previous levels and grab their stat points, as they start out with their base stats. I'm happy this was implemented, because as fun as it was to replay the game with every skater, it's far more fun having the flexibility to swap between them. Though this flexibility does take away from the replayability of the game. Once you complete a goal with any skater, it's done forever. There's no going back through and completing the goals with every skater available. Once the goals are completed, they're done. The old skaters are back, along with new skaters I'm familiar and unfamiliar with. It's great to see new skaters added to this game. I love how much they add to the gameplay. I'm also glad they brought back the secret VHS tapes in each level. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD changed it to a DVD, which made sense at the time, as that was the most common form of physical video media. I'm just glad it's back for nostalgia's sake. Pro Skater 2 is even more faithful to the original game. The biggest change is the absence of cash floating around everywhere. Instead, stat points are placed in different locations around each level, and are treated exactly how they are in Pro Skater 1. I see why they did it this way, but I do miss grabbing the money in every stage. Everything else in the game makes an appearance from what I can tell. Even the unlockable levels are here. The soundtrack is also amazing, probably the best the series has ever seen. Most of the original tracks are back, but they've added quite a few new songs that fit right at home in a Tony Hawk game. This game is incredibly playable. I'm by far not an expert on the Tony Hawk series. My control prowess is confined to the first 2 games. That means my combos are only linked together by manuals, and I got by just fine with my abilities. I did discover a few new moves like the wall plant, revert, and leveling out in the air, which really became useful in the later stages. If you're new to the series or have been playing for decades, these games will feel great to play. A few other things about this game I haven't mentioned are the Create a Skater and Park Builder modes. I never got into these on the older games, and I didn't even touch them on this game, so I don't feel as if I can give a good perspective on either of them. In fact, I didn't even change the look of the characters I played as. I just kept them the same as they were when I selected them. Perfection is nearly impossible. If something gets close, we hold on to it tightly. Everything else feels inferior. We as people hold on to those moments with deep conviction. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is no stranger to remakes or remasters. Each release has attempted to recapture the perfection that inspired an entire generation and sold countless skateboards. Nobody wants to replay something they genuinely love but now lacks what made it special. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD brought updated versions of the first 2 Pro Skater games into their gaming generations. Those updates came with a cost. The first brought a lack of challenge based on stats that didn't reset. The second try in HD meant better visuals, but it also came with a small amount of levels, wonky physics, and inaccurate level design. But Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 is different. It brings the necessary changes to the series. Some take away from the replayability, but enhances the overall game. It's as perfect as we could get with another remake. And that kind of perfection is nearly impossible.